Hi, my name is Alex Powers. My favorite Power Query feature is query folding. Welcome to Power Query Magic.
Welcome, Alex. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Win. This is some deep cuts if people know who Alex Powers is. That's what my thoughts were.
Well, we've crossed paths but never met. I've followed your work and sort of seen you on various media and sort of shows and blog posts and articles. So yeah, great to have you on, and we'll get into the questions, but bear with me on this slightly overlong analogy. Okay. So back in the day, I was a massive fan of the TV show Cheers.
Oh, we still watch it nightly, me and the wife.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I've started watching it again. I bought every episode on Apple TV for like $25 or something. Awesome. So I've watched every episode at least twice.
Yep.
Okay. And back in the day of VHS tapes, I even had like a box full of recorded episodes, proper geek level fan. Okay. So then I was 23 years old, traveling across America on the Greyhound bus. And I got to Boston and I went to the Cheers bar, and there's the sign outside. Yeah. But you go inside.
It's not a bar.
Not the same.
Yeah.
It's not even a bar. Yeah. It's just, it lost its magic for me a little bit. So you joined Microsoft a few years back. What's it like on the inside? Is it what you expected?
Yes, and I will say the reason why it is what I expected is because if you look at any company and the way that they've deployed SharePoints and Excels and OneDrives, you're just like, oh my gosh, there's so much chaos everywhere. Well, just remember that we were the first people, eating that dog food. So the way that we use and abuse the programs, I absolutely love it, just because it's always like, oh gosh, there's so much cool stuff going on. But it is chaos. It is fun in the best degree to that using that analogy of just like we tested it first before everyone else. So I absolutely love it.
So you get the real buggy versions of everything.
Sprawl, everything. I can tell now, like from when I even started to, it's 2 years later, like they're starting to like roll things back, or we don't have open permissions on everything like we used to. They're like, all right, Azure resources, we're going to take control, MIP, information protection, we're going to have all labels on everything. So I can see that they're going through a transformation even internally at Microsoft during this kind of interesting period. But also if you look at like all the hackers, everything that everyone is doing, like, hey, you have to do it now. So
right.
It's cool though.
And you're senior program manager?
That is correct. So I came into Microsoft as a premier field engineer, now titled customer engineer. So a lot of that was proactive education. So I trained probably 4,000 people on Power BI 4 days a week for 4 months straight. So I was just doing the grind, helping people adopt. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then technical specialist, just helping kind of go competes. So, if a customer says, Power BI can't do this because, this vendor, Tableau, Click, etc., said you guys can't do it, I was the guy who was showing up saying, no, we can. And then, kind of blowing people's minds. So that's what I always love, is the light bulb moments of people.
So that experience then of teaching all those people, now there's got to be a mix of abilities with that many people.
Yes.
You've got a broad range of backgrounds and skill sets. Do you sort of see, the broad range of reaction then, in terms of some people still struggling with the concept, but other people, they just eyes light up and you just see that little spark and you go, oh, they're going to get it. They're going to go for this.
So this is always what's tough, right? Like if you do any virtual trainings, like some days you have a really engaging chat and like people will be lively on the mic if they have the open mic. And then you'll have like after 2 days, nobody said anything and you're just like deep down. You're like, why didn't they like this? And then people are just like, oh my gosh, you had the best time in the world. I absolutely love learning from you. And you're just like, well, why didn't you say anything?
Yes.
But my favorite experience is like, I'll just say it, like I love little old ladies who are learning Power BI and like doing crazy things, and it's just like, hold on, like this is truly like the self-service portion of Power BI, and I always call it like the BI bubble because I went out on kind of the tab editor an hour. I was just telling everyone about tab editor, and I thought we'd all be writing C sharp, up and down, day and night. Not the case. I got done doing my last session, and I just jump on a screen share, and somebody says, "How do I connect my SharePoint list?" That was it. It's not about what all the experts are doing. It's truly those self-service users.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and what does your role involve now? So, what is a program manager?
Yeah, so senior program manager on the Power BI customer advisory team. So aligned with a lot of our big strategic accounts, some of the ones that are just looking at pushing the limits of Power BI, always wanting to do more, bigger things. At this point, like looking at P5 workloads. I want to pull in 400 gigabytes of compressed memory. So I was like, all right, well, let's figure out how this scales. From there, it is a lot of pro dev tooling. But then it's also like finding those little portions of the product, the quality of life items, where I hear comments from customers, I record the impact, and then hopefully we can tell that story to say, why don't we make these investments into these areas? Obviously, I'm a data integrations guy, so I'm just fighting for everything on the Power Query side as much as I possibly can.
Yeah. Keep up the fight.
Yep.
So, the product is just, how good is Power Query? Let me put that open question to you.
It's incredible, and I mean, if we were to like look back through the timeline, I remember sitting at my desk as a former Excel VBA guy. Like I cleaned everything in VBA, I automated everything in VBA, and I just got done reading Ken Pohl's book, M is for Data Monkey, for those who don't have it yet. And I struggled with Power Query in that moment, and I said, I'm just going to do this in VBA. Like, screw this Power Query thing. I'm just going to go back to VBA. And I thought through it, and I've not written like any VBA since fighting through that one moment. And it's incredible whenever you get that, I love it.
Yeah, it is. It's same experience for me in terms of, well, I just think I saw some of the buttons and things, and it was just like, oh, that would have taken me a day in VBA to do. And I even went back to old clients and projects and said, this way, and it's a bit clunky for you guys to maintain. If anything goes wrong, well, we can just replace it all with Power Query, and now it takes 2 seconds and it's 4 lines of code. It's like, really?
It was an incredible moment, good. And especially like if you've been around Power Query for a long time, like I was the 2010 days, so it had to be an add-in. I had to go talk to IT to convince them to update the version of Power Query, and people are like, what do you mean updating the versions? That was a thing back in the day. And I remember still coming back from a Data Pigs Technologies boot camp. I won a visit from the Excel.tv guys to go hang out with Mike Alexander, and he took over the Excel Bible, if you're familiar with that, from John Walkenbach. As you tell, he's a huge nerd of people in the community. So I sat at his workshop, kind of learned that Power Query, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this can change how our team does work. And I brought it back to them, and I showed them, and you know what their reaction was? They just thought it was one more thing to have to learn.
Oh.
So I had to look at technology through the lens of convincing people about the benefit of this. Like they didn't have that light bulb moment. So then I was starting to figure out, well, how do you approach technology? Showing the benefit. It took a while. Some people have latched on. Other people are just like, hey, I'm doing VBA. This is my thing. Not really interested.
Yeah.
So I'd be kind of curious from you. Have you had those moments where you've had to convince people about Power Query?
Yeah, a little bit, but not too much of a struggle. I do get people asking, I want to learn VBA, and where do I start? And I say, well, do you know about this Power Query thing?
Yep.
And if they say no, I'm like, well, what do you actually want to do with your VBA? So, and if it's anything to do with data extraction and cleanup, and it's like, learn Power Query first.
I agree.
And then when you need VBA, it's just like a smaller pool of people need VBA, I think.
Yep.
But no, I to be honest, when I've trained people and shown them, formula ways of doing it, left, right, mid functions, all those sorts of things. And all of a sudden you show them you can do it with a click in Power Query, or, extract the right-hand 3 characters. And this is much easier. And you're like, yeah. But I think the reality is, though, that users in business, they just got proper jobs to do.
Yep.
And having the time to go and just take the extra hour to do something the first time, compared to just getting it done in, half an hour that time, and then half an hour next month, and half an hour. That's the trigger. Some people just want to learn to do it the better way. Other people just want to get it done, and that's it. So it's a tricky one.
Get it done. So I love the Excel, kind of their tagline, where they say 95% of users only use 5% of the Excel's capabilities.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
and
we are that 1% that is probably like 6% of the capabilities just because we clicked on, get data one day.
yeah.
But it's incredible to think that gap is so wide, and it's just sitting there now in the tab. People still don't know.
They just don't know. And, that's part of my aim of this whole concept here, doing Power Query Magic and stuff, is just to elevate the awareness a little bit more. Here's a question for you then.
Yep.
What do you think Power BI would look like if Power Query didn't exist? And when I say what it would look like, what do you think the user pool would be like for Power BI?
So I think it would definitely be skewed towards the DBA side, so more of the traditional. I still have opinions that I think people love Power Query more than they probably do Power BI, just because they've never had like ETL. And I still see people when they land in Power Query and Power BI and they do their transformations, they get it out into the report layer and they just create a big flat table. And then their first question is, how do I export it back to Excel?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, hold on, let's dial this back. Did you really just want to do Power Query in Excel? If that's the case, let's just copy over your M code. And whenever they learn that the language is flexible from one program to the next, I try and tell that story, because you're learning one skill that could potentially touch 12 different products now.
Is it in 12 Power Query?
If not more, because they've released a few recently.
Wow.
So to me, it's like,
yeah.
M is a language. And if you decide to go in on this, like 50% of your learning, you're just going to be ramped through. If you land in Power Apps or Automate or kind of some of the different ones now.
Well, in my training course, the course starts with Power Query, obviously.
Yep.
This is the Power BI training course. It starts with Power Query, and at least now the formula bar is on by default, which is awesome. You used to have to tell people to turn that on. And my question is to the group, they're only 20 minutes into the course. They've never really played with Power BI before. And it's like, okay, so what's this language called? This formula language. And do you know what everyone says?
What do they say?
DAX.
Really?
Because everyone's heard of DAX.
Interesting.
And no one's heard of M. And it's a weird name anyway. So everyone knows this DAX thing is part of this formula thing, part of Power BI. So yeah, always get people saying DAX. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
So I know the title is a long one. What is it? Power Query formula language, and it may even have a word or two more in there. M is for mashup, for those who don't know. But wow, I did not know that people were thinking that was DAX. That's confusing.
Just to the uninitiated, they're not people who've built anything ever. They've never touched this stuff before. But I think you just hear people moaning more about DAX and how hard DAX is and all this sort of stuff. And no one mentions Power M code because probably the ideal is you don't even have to write any. You just click the buttons.
So me and Alex Dupe were of 2Alex fame. We've had this conversation too. Like, you don't see as much noise, visibility of kind of the Power Query side because, quote unquote, it just works. Like, you can have bad Power Query M transformations. You can still get to the final state. You cannot get to the final state with DAX. If it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. So that's kind of interesting though, to hear that people are like, oh, I hear the groans, but this is actually pretty fun.
Yeah, that's it. And it is, and it's only when you get into the more sort of, and I say advanced, I'm using the sort of from a beginner's point of view,
Yep.
stuff like merges and referencing other tables and all those sorts of elements that people start to go, oh, okay. And then you show them a query merging with itself and they just, and it's just like, what is this? Or put the steps in different orders and it still works. And it's so forgiving,
That was my mind-blowing experience with Power Query was whenever I self-merged with kind of like an earlier step. And I was like, wait a second, you can jump steps and you can do this. And that's when I really learned that this is the language that I need to invest in. Interesting,
definitely.
though, maybe we'll have to think about and kind of come back to the topic, but just kind of the M language, we have the DAX Bible. Is there anything that we were like, this is the M language Bible? Only because I have read the M technical reference documents, and they're the most dry, boring text.
Okay.
But I learned so much from them, but I would not wish that upon anyone else.
Right. Need something a bit more accessible is what you're thinking.
Yep.
And did you ever use Microsoft Query back in the day in Excel?
A little bit, and that was quite the experience.
I actually built a few solutions using it, and that was my sort of little stepping stone into Power Query. And I was just like, oh, I can just link and refresh and change a cell, and it will then rerun the query automatically and pull the data in, and I haven't got any VBA anywhere. It was like,
I was about to say the cell parameters was where it was at, but I think I learned it later when I was coming back to past the VBA, kind of into the Power Query, but not everyone else is on board. So they were always looking at, well, what else can we do with just SQL? I was like, why are we concentrating on SQL? Like, what are we holding on to this thing for? And I still enjoy those fights too. It's like, I don't want to learn SQL. I want to learn M just day and night. One language is enough for me.
Yeah. And I've had a few people actually just last week. So they were essentially pasting their SQL code straight into the advanced box at the start of connecting to their SQL database.
Yeah.
Because they knew SQL.
Yeah.
And somebody had also given them, another person was just given the code and they just pasted it in. But that brings its own problems, doesn't it, in terms of query folding and the like, and maybe we'll get into that in a little bit. So we'll hold that thought, right? We'll come back.
Love it.
So are you in St. Louis?
I am.
Is it pronounced St. Louis or St. Louis?
It's whatever you want. St. Louis.
What do you call it? What do locals call it? That's what I want to know.
St. Louis, the Lou. I mean,
St. Louis.
We got 10,000 names for it.
Okay. And were you born there?
No, I was not. So I was born in northern Illinois, probably a few hours outside of Chicago. So middle of a cornfield, just small country town. Kind of did 3 years in an industrial chain factory right outside of high school. And then I thought, hey, my brain is a little bit smarter and stronger than my back. So I started getting into more of kind of computers and everything else. I'd always been around them, but just definitely it's kind of in a little bit more in depth. So that was my journey, at least to getting to corporate America, I should say.
So did you have an idea of what you wanted to do when you were sort of leaving school?
No, kind of right outside of high school, especially my area is just like, hey, go get a job in a factory, start getting to work, and then, go to community college. So doing that a little bit, just general studies. I thought maybe I would want to do some communications, marketing, etc. But time was never on my side. I wanted to do cool things. So for those listening, I am a complete high school graduate. I didn't do the whole college route, so it doesn't have to be for everyone. Just dedication to my craft and technology. It's kind of what I did. Yeah,
because we've both been analysts for banks from looking at your
financial service,
your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah,
reporting on cards and mortgages and secured loans and all that sort of stuff.
I love it.
So
we speak language.
I did 4 years university. I did a chartered accountancy qualification. We both ended up just mashing numbers in Excel for banks. So it doesn't matter where you come from. You end up in the Excel, and if you love that Excel thing, it can take your career wherever. So forget about the qualifications. Just be good at and enjoy what you do.
I agree.
So was that the foundation for your Excel experience then, the time at the bank, or was that before that, or where was your Excel experience honed?
I'll say home, but I'll take you back to my first memory. It was
Oh
my
yeah.
It was in my grandpa's basement. My dad and uncle were looking through this massive tomb, is what I like to call it, and they were just like so excited to learn how to write these new crazy things for computers called formulas
Okay.
for Excel version 4.0 on an Apple Macintosh. So at that point, I was just like embedded in my brain of like they're excited about like this formula thing. So I always remembered Excel in the back of my mind, but whenever I started working at a call center, I know me and Oz have talked about this all the time, just recording data in an Excel spreadsheet, just basic data entry. Here's a line, type it. Here's a line, type it. Eventually you figure out how to do formulas. But from there, a guy took a week off for vacation and he said, here's a Six Sigma KPI metric spreadsheet that I update every day. And he's gone for a week and he comes back and goes, hey, you did a pretty good job at that. You should just own that for me. And that's when I learned about ownership and transfer of ownership.
Okay.
So, someone always says, I have good business requirements documented for you. They don't have anything documented. Don't ever listen to anyone when it comes to documentation. But from there, just doing KPIs kind of for a central group. And I was just an Excel guy by myself, having to do a lot of the work. So it was, a lot of those not having time off, taking a day off, meaning you'd have to train someone else. But eventually they brought together like all of the Excel guys and girls in Microsoft Access as well and SharePoint. And they created like a central office team. So I was really around some of the best within the organization at that time. So my skills were just through the roof. And one of the highest performing teams I've ever been a part of. A lot of thoughts there, but we'll figure out what you want to dive into.
Yeah. So in terms of that experience, did you learn or take your path go into more of the database side of things and learning different technologies because of that then? Because my experience was just, I was pretty much Excel exclusive. I never really branched off into anything else until Power BI came along.
Yeah.
So what about you?
So definitely at that point, like I'd never really used Microsoft Access. To me, it felt like it was just a very steep learning curve. So getting around those people and they're like, hey, here's how to create tables and relationships and objects. And I was like, all right, well, this is all new and interesting. And I know Patrick LeBlanc has talked about it too. Just Access, gets you into SQL Server, kind of on to the next thing. So for me, it was starting to learn these basic concepts of, all right, well, here's relationships. From there, though, a lot of still VBA. So a lot of it was, it's 8 a.m., boss needs a report on their desk, automate. And a lot of it was the collection of spreadsheets. So Outlook, I was writing Visual Basic scripting, doing HTML to kind of create complete tracking websites of time for completions. At one point, we had a team of probably 12, and I think whenever I kind of left, there was down to a team of 4. We had automated so much. Not in a bad way. They weren't like fired or released. It was just they moved on, got promotions. So incredibly excited for those people that took advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah. And that, you mentioned about tables.
Yeah.
And for me, that one concept is key to all this stuff. It's just the idea of thinking in terms of tables, of structured data. And I think it's something that they take for granted that, it just makes sense, it's tables. But not, there's a massive number of people who just don't think that way to start with. And you have to bring them into that world. I still teach, in my Power BI course, because one of the data sources is an Excel file with a table in it.
Yeah.
In the course. People are like, what's this little blue symbol mean on the Power Query navigator pane compared to this? And I said, well, that's the sheet name and that's a table. Oh, what's a table?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, right, I get to show people tables. And you talk through this and you can write a formula and you go, look, this formula equals sum of table name, column name.
Yep.
We'll use this again in DAX in a 2 hours time or whatever. And it's just this thinking of structured tables. It's the core. If you don't get that, you're out, I think, of this whole process.
So that is
a real struggle.
That is the difference, right? Because Power BI, you have to use a table. Like there is no other way. And in Excel, it's still the Wild West of creativity. and chaos. So from there, people have been able to do reporting for years and years and years without a proper table. Control T, my favorite hotkey, right? Just table, table,
Yeah,
table. Whenever I
completely.
first learned about the table object in Excel, it was that, like, the
Yeah,
skies opened up, you'd hear the angels singing. Still, it's one of those like 5% of people, or 95% of people will use the 5%. A lot of people don't use tables, still to this day.
yeah, yeah. And play to fair play to the Excel team. There's like 4 different buttons for tables.
Yep.
They're not short of adding the option. There's format table, insert table. There's a
Yep.
control T. There's all sorts of options. So they've tried. So, but still, people do not know about this whole concept of tables. I think tables, Power Query, the data model to some extent, but those two, Power Query and tables, are just the biggest thing to happen ever to Excel that makes them just totally robust and awesome. So
Well,
yeah,
that's where I don't know if you kind of saw in the threads. I think Brian Jones is posting Power Query and Excel Online starting to show up in the pane. So hopefully,
yeah,
pretty soon they're working on at least being able to refresh those. So thinking
yeah,
about like Power Query Online experience of data flows now being in Excel Online. Maybe scheduling that automation through Power Automate to do a refresh. That is low-level ETL right now. So whenever we
yeah.
get there, I'll be excited. I'll be curious though on
We
the Power
will.
BI side, how many people continue to use Power BI for that low-level kind of data extraction versus just going Excel Online exclusively.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, and like you said, you mentioned earlier about people who just want to load it up, clean it up, and then export it back to Excel. I get that question probably every course I run.
Oh yeah,
How do I just export this back out? You want to get it in, and it doesn't come out in a nice format. So yeah, same thing. Just maybe you just want to use Excel start to finish. You don't necessarily need the Power BI thing.
people
And it
love
could be even now that with
Power BI.
well, Power Query has got such a broad use case.
Yep.
It's just got, it's not just about, getting data ready for a report. It could be the report itself. It could be the data dump. It can be the cleansing for doing some, I don't know, transfer to a new accounting system. You've got to extract your data, add on a new bunch of GL codes, remap them, load it somewhere else. It can be all sorts of things. So it's just such a broad application that it should be known by more people. For me, there's like a bit of a pyramid of use, and Power Query's there with a big broad base, and then the data model is a bit narrower, and then the sort of Power BI is a bit narrower again.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's just so good. Right, I get distracted. So your time at State Farm Bank, you seem to overlap with the time you set up and ran Not About the Cell.
Yeah. So that
Seems
was
to be
kind
a
of
bit of a
that was kind of on the way out. They were going through digital transformation, so they let go of about 3,000 people. Opportunity, everything else. They said, "Hey, we can move you back to a cornfield if you want to go live there." And I said, "Nope, no thanks." So kind of after 10 years and 1 week, said goodbye. Went and kind of joined as I was kind of getting It's Not About the Cell started up, just as like some consulting, because I wasn't really sure what was going to go on with my career. I did 10 years at a place. So I always tell everyone, very sympathetic through technology changes. Digital transformation can continue to happen for folks for probably the next 10, 15, 20 years, as new technology comes along, automation, etc. But I knew I had a gap that I needed to close. So I went to just kind of a small business. They were tool agnostic. They didn't care about anything. And this is where I kind of had a good Twitter thread today is I do ask companies now what type of workstation they're going to assign me. Because I showed up there and I got a Macintosh, just a Mac, and doing Excel on a Mac, totally different world. The Power Query experience, only 2 or 3 connectors. So I will never do that again, working on a Mac. I'm sorry for those who like it. But I learned about parallels. I learned about running, virtual desktops, kind of through the Mac, just like Power BI. But I'm still just that experience. But I had a lot of gaps that I needed to close. So doing like enterprise grade ETL, using Data Factory, using some other tools. Uh, I knew that the market was changing, and that's where now like Power BI. If you're looking at how do you stand out, and there's millions and billions of people using Excel, there is a very smaller pool of people using Power BI. Start learning it today. So that was the gap I had to close, kind of after the fact.
And what was so setting up, sort of not about the cell? What was the remit of the company, or what was the challenges with it?
So I started doing a little bit of training, kind of just starting out with Power BI. So that was a lot of fun. Did a couple workshops there. Started doing consulting work. Realized I don't like that at all. Just being on tight timelines and everything else, and you try and get project requirements back, and they don't respond to you in time. So trying to do like a day job and then kind of a night job until you can pay your bills on consulting work was just not working out for me. So I try to do only training. But it was fun. I did it for a little bit, at least until kind of the Microsoft thing came along. But continue. Yeah, so I've got a long list.
How did that come along? How did the Microsoft role come up? Was it, what was the story behind that?
Yeah. And there's so many cool kind of milestones and moments. So I was really passionate, at least about, modern Excel, as Rob Cully called it, where he said, hey, it's the Power Query, it's the Power Pivot. Power BI is now starting to kind of creep up into this space. So I connected with a local Microsoft guy and I said, hey, I want to create a user group for, modern Excel and Power BI. He was a Power BI guy, so he's like, yeah, whatever, weird guy. Like, I'll help you get this thing started. So, we have our first user group. I'm just there spouting all the cool things about Excel. So I think there was about 4 organizers, and there was only about 7 people there. So only about 3 attendees. We were just way too early to the Power BI party, is what I learned. But from there, I created a great relationship with a Microsoft kind of a worker. He saw my journey over like 3 or 4 years. So I absolutely just owe him everything. So whenever I had the opportunity to kind of go work at a major brewery here in St. Louis, people can maybe guess what that is. But I went there and I started doing Power BI work, working shoulder to shoulder with the Microsoft guys. And as soon as something came up, they were just like, hey, let's go. I know you've been working this for a few years. But in all honesty, it was also just a Twitter message that somebody put out there saying, hey, does anyone know Power BI in the Midwest? And that was all it took to get in the doors at Microsoft.
Right.
So,
yeah. And a bit of experience and talent.
There it is. I tell everyone, like, I would love to help you. I just need to know that you exist. So for those who are out there listening, if you don't have a Twitter, if you're not on LinkedIn, get those started today, because we all love lifting each other up, but I just need to know that you're out there and what is it that you want to accomplish. And I'll be your biggest advocate to get you to wherever you want to be.
Great advice. And did you ever do a blog back in the day?
I did. Oh my gosh. All right. So I love talking about this, and maybe you can like be my psychologist here and talk me through my problems. So it's not about thecell.com. It's my Excel blog. My first article is about tables because I just love tables. I got to the point, just writing very in-depth, complex articles on very simple things. So I kind of learned about being a tortured author, where it's like, hey, and Rob Cully talked about this too, where he's like, I like writing, but I don't like the act of actually doing it because I never feel like I'm done with the article. So at that point, it was just like a lot to go into writing. I still think about it now and then. Maybe you can talk me into it. But I like leaving it as a moment in time, because I was the 184th best Excel blogger, whatever that means, right?
Right.
In the world of Chandoos and kind of everyone else that are out there collecting billions. It was like, I saw that the Power BI market had not really, kind of surfaced as of yet. There was different pockets of people doing it. So at that point, I just said, I'm going to go do live in person. So I'm going to do live user groups in my backyard. I'm going to travel, maybe to Chicago or kind of Orlando and kind of build my name just by doing live events. But now it's, I'm in the era of COVID. I'm stuck inside. Do I go back to writing or not, Win? What are your thoughts? Or has the world moved on to video in podcasts? What's going on?
I think it's just, pick the media that you enjoy doing. I've seen you've done as of today, 8,414 Twitter posts.
Wow, that's awesome.
Okay. So compared to mine, and I looked at mine, I'm about 2,000. Okay. So you're 4 times, which is a lot. I don't know how long you've been on Twitter. I've probably been on there, I don't know, 4 years, 5, I'm not sure. But yeah, you've I think that's your media. It gives you that ability just to get into the up-to-date messaging, get that across. I think just pick whatever works for you.
Well, that's where, kind of talking earlier, you got to be a deep cut person to really know me or my content. So you're like, yeah, I've got Alex's GitHub starred. And it's like, all right, yeah, they know me, or they've gone through kind of the guy in a cube and kind of the Hey Alex command over there and having fun. I always go in these spurts where I'll like create a ton of content. So maybe it'd be like the Power BI workshops where I just create top to bottom. Here's go learn kind of expert level stuff. I'll create Jupyter notebooks, PowerShell commandlets, whatever else. But I never sit down to write a blog about them. I just drop them out there for people, and they pick them up. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But it's always kind of fun to think about that.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one. I don't know. The blog it is a point in time, and I think stuff is changing so quick now that you can just write something. And this is another tip for people searching for stuff: is look at the date published.
Yeah.
When you're looking at a response about how something works or something doesn't work, especially, just look at the date that was posted, because stuff changes. Screenshots change, names of things change, capabilities change. It's just ridiculous now.
See, this is where we were pretty early on adopters of Power Query. I remember when you had to do an append of files in a folder structure. You had to go into the earlier steps, do the binary, do all these custom M things. So I am from those days, and when there was no IntelliSense at all. So I always see that as kind of like a cutoff point for some people too, where they really love M because they had to learn it. Like back in the day, you had to learn it to do complex or semi-complex things. Now they've done a lot of that through the GUI, thank goodness. But then it also comes back to our earlier question and topic that we can kind of explore here is like, what is that definitive guide for M now? Or does it need to exist? Should it just be pure GUI? And I get these these arguments all the time from folks like, no, it should be GUI only. I like writing M. I like kind of doing fun, complex things. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. This thing I always struggle with is sometimes the examples for some of these functions and more complex elements. The examples are almost hard to understand as the function itself sometimes. And you're just like, what is this trying to do? What's the real world scenario? And not that I could do a better job of putting up a real world scenario, because there's just so many. Yep. But that's part of the challenge, is just like, wow, that's not really what I'm trying to do. How do you even know what to look for? That's the biggest challenge to a beginner. It's just like, well, now you've done it, and now I've seen it, I can do it again, and I know what you just did. But the discoverability and be able to, just be shown once or pointed in the right direction, there's a gap there for me.
Oh yeah.
It's just people want to know how do you know you need to unpivot that? Or how do you know you need to, go and how do you know there's a function called x.pad start to give me my leading zeros on a it's just, well, you just read a lot. You read all the books, you follow the blog, you get on Twitter, you see people posting. But most people, business users, don't have, they've either not got the interest, which is fair enough, or not got the time. So it's that discoverability piece that even if there is a cohesive piece of M code architecture, documentation library type thing, which there's those things. But discoverability, that's my bugbear.
So text from example, the AI capability, do you feel like that's underused at this point? for those people who do want to do maybe those complex things, but they don't quite know the function or what to do. Because I think it does a pretty good job whenever I've typed examples, and it'll write semi-complex kind of functions back. Be curious though with your thoughts there.
Yeah, I guess, again, knowing that that's there, or that's what they want to do. You've got to know that that's what you want to do. That's where I do see people struggling or asking that question in the course, is that they go, well, I know that's great that I can do it, but how would you have found that? How did you work that out, that existed?
Yeah.
That's some of the things. I'm still really wary of the whole AI generated solutions to things.
Really?
Because it's just a case of, not because it's like, weird dark magic stuff. It's just, the analogy I use is giving a person a fish rather than teaching them to fish.
Yeah.
It never shows the steps of how it did it. It's the thing that then, you're not teaching people how to do it, and you're not teaching people the traps that they might be getting themselves into. It works. Great. It works today, but will it work tomorrow, and can you fix it when it goes wrong? So I don't know. I'm a bit torn.
So thinking about easy measures kind of on the DAX side, right? Like we saw this GPT-3 have AI where you can just type a question and it does something for you. What if you had that on the Power Query side?
Same sort of concept, I think. Well, again, like just something simple like column from examples. Yeah, I say to people, you use it, it's awesome. But if you cannot understand the code that's been written, do not trust it.
Really?
Because it can write misleading stuff. You give it 3 examples and it looks like the first 500 row or first 50 rows work.
Yep.
But there's some other slightly different examples in row, let's say row 5,000, which you can't even preview, that's not doing the right thing, and you load it and you trust it. Because you haven't really read the fact of what the M code is doing. So it's a good pointer, and it's a good, that I like column examples much better than, flash fill in Excel, because flash fill does not tell you what it does. So I'd never trust flash fill unless I can just see the 25 results it's produced. So, but the column from examples, I want to be able to understand, not necessarily be able to write that M code from scratch, but be able to read it, understand it, and go, okay, I now understand what it's doing. And maybe even a sort of, some sort of plain English or whatever language explanation of what the steps are doing. That's where the AI would be useful.
So I love this, that you're raising the caution flag where you're asking trainees to be like, I want you to stop and read it. And if you want to go learn about the language, that's great. But now you know that this exists. And if you want to use it with reckless abandonment, feel free as well. Giving them the option.
Know that you're doing something. If you don't understand what that code is doing, it might do stuff you don't understand that it's doing. So, be aware. The same thing with, there's the insights for pivot tables and stuff in Excel now.
Yeah.
And you can just click a button on your table of data. And if your table isn't a nice table, then you'll get all sorts of odd results. So that's step 1, is that people are clicking on stuff that isn't a table. And then it'll just generate you a pivot table explaining what it's done, why it's done it, how it works, and you get an answer. Or you can type in, give me the top 5 results, but is it really giving you, what's that based on, and that's my issue with this stuff.
Interesting.
Still wary.
I gotta win you over. I think all the new stuff is taking us time.
Look, I like it for saving time because I understand how it's all built.
Yeah.
So I've got a real different viewpoint for me using it compared to somebody who's never done it the hard way. Speeding up my work, awesome.
Yep.
Giving somebody a solution that they don't understand how it was arrived at, I'm really wary about.
This goes back to those comments where you had kind of said, hey, some people are willing to go learn something and some just need to get it done. I always had this concept of just busy work. Like, there is just an incredible amount of busy work that really has no tangible value. So to build something of tangible value that someone can go, yes, I made a decision based on this report, this number, that is incredibly difficult and a complex thing to accomplish and achieve. So anyone that has built something of value, incredible kudos to you. These tools like Power Query, like Power BI, they can take you even further with those achievements. But if you're purely just looking for something that's busy work, we got a lot of that for you too.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into. Oh, actually, before I mention that, so you did a couple of YouTube sort of series as well. So you did the two Alex.
Yep.
And I'm going to ask, what's the plural of Alex?
Alex's?
Because it's the two.
ALEX?
That's it, is it?
Yeah.
Well, see, I've learned something new.
We didn't know either. We were using ALEX, ES, and S, and a few other things. And my wife is a writer. She's like, you guys are doing this all wrong. So luckily, Alex Duper fixed it at some point.
Yeah. And what was the concept of that YouTube channel?
I don't even know. So it was pretty like a long time ago. Alex Duper needed some help on Reddit with query folding for Databricks, and I helped him out. And I was like, "Hey, Power Query is a case-sensitive language." He didn't know, whatever. All of us, like in the Power Query side, oh yeah, we've dealt with capitals and lower cases for years and years and years now. But I could tell from there, we just kept talking internally. And he was like, hey, I want to start creating like a YouTube channel. Do you mind just jumping in and kind of being a guest host or host, co-host? I don't know what the official title is. I was like, yeah, I've got 10,000 other things going on. Let's just do it. And I think that's
why not?
Common trait of a lot of us is like, we're always overbooked, but we're always willing to say yes. Like to the next thing. It's like, yeah, of course. So now we just like infrequently kind of jump on right after a guy in the cube, just do some weird random topics. The one caveat that we had going into the show is we're never doing any prep. So we pick a topic, but anything past that is just, what do you want to talk about? Do you have a PowerPoint you want to show? So we just kind of riff live in the moment.
All good. And then there's the, on the Not About the Cell YouTube channel, you've got the 30-day Power Query folding challenge.
Did you take that win?
Which I did not. I did not have the time. I apologize. I know.
It's fine.
I feel bad.
No.
So talk us through it. And to be honest, my clients that I have, I've not come across one that's using a SQL database yet.
I believe it. That's where a lot.
So I've not had the real life scenario of having to do that. So, but talk us through it. What was the query folding challenge? It seemed to be really popular. Lots of people got involved. There was lots of buzz about it. I still see people taking it now and stuff and mentioning it. So talk us through it.
Hashtag 30D query. A lot of it came from me and just like creating content. And I said, I want to do something as kind of like the drip campaign. So for those who are maybe familiar with like marketing terms, it's just saying, come back tomorrow, come back tomorrow, come back tomorrow for 30 days. And I did it every day, just at 10 a.m. local time. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take a 1 through 10 ramp up. So on day one, it was a very simple challenge. All right, here's Power Query, here's query folding. Don't break the folding. So what is query folding for those who just don't know? It is letting the processing happen at the source. So generally with the relational database engine, I'm going to use the SQL engine as opposed to the mashup engine of Power Query. So if you're really thinking about enterprise scale, big data, massive projects, you want to leverage the engine itself as opposed to the tiny, tiny, tiny little mashup engine of Power Query. So from there, day one, you're going to have a great time. Day two, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is an easy challenge. This is fun. Day 3, 4, 5, 6, on like day number 8, you're like yelling at me, what are you doing on Twitter? Why is this so complex? I hate this challenge. And then at day 10, you're just excited because you got through 1 through 10. And then on kind of challenge 11, I reset you back to the easy stuff. So I never want anyone to be discouraged kind of at these different milestones. Hey, we're hitting reset. Come back day 11, come back day 21. Just continue to build that muscle. The biggest takeaway the win for a lot of people was their comfort of M. A lot of them didn't really do a lot in the advanced editor. This forced them to kind of solve these puzzles, solve the challenges, and a lot of people just absolutely loved it. For completing 30 or just getting as far as they could there, said, hey, I feel a lot more confident about doing the M language and opening up the advanced editor once in a while. So in my book, that's a win.
Can you give us a quick example of one type of challenge?
Oh goodness. So some of it will be,
Just conceptually.
yeah. So some of it may just be like a simple SQL join. So home tab, join one table to another, and then from there you're just expanding a column, maybe doing a filter. So like a where clause. So on the SQL side, and then some of it may be some aggregate values. So you have to do some group bys, summing a column and then saying, well, of these columns, which one is the max? And then you have to filter for those that are greater than the top 5 or whatever else it is.
Yeah.
Little simple puzzles. So if you're into Rubik's Cubes, whatever else, it's a fun challenge.
Yeah. And I think there's an element of, people who like the puzzles and stuff are also the people who end up liking doing Excel and Power Query. And It's just that solution. There's a challenge there and you need to get to a solution. There must be a way of doing it.
Yep.
And, it's how many hours are you willing to burn in the learning process of getting, to that solution.
Well, that's why I felt, good and bad, because a few people on the other side of the world, they're like, it drops at like 11 o'clock at night and I can't go to bed until I solve it. They're up until 3 in the morning or whatever else. I'm like, oh gosh, I love this, but same rate, like get your sleep. And then just meet new friends across the world too, like Sube's, Mark Beadle, Udit's, like so many great people that just like jumped in and started helping each other out and sharing their own solutions.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, crowdsourcing knowledge is like the best. So once again, absolutely love the community in that respect. And
the jumping back to a sort of something I mentioned a little while near the start was about students who were basically taking some SQL code and pasting that in the advanced box right at the start of connecting to the SQL database.
Yep.
So when should people do that? And should they ever do that? And when shouldn't they? And do you have some advice?
So a few items. If you are going to just copy and paste SQL into the advanced editor, and that is the only step you're ever going to do, that's fine. That's fine. It's those people who want to do, well, I want to kind of do some of it in SQL, but I also really like this Power Query thing, so I want to do additional transformations on top of it. All right, well, you've now broken the folding, and your performance is going to suffer. So do you want to go write better SQL and kind of do a little bit more complex things on the SQL side where you kind of enjoy doing them on the simple side with the GUI? And like, all right, well, what else do I have to do? You can do it all in Power Query. And now you can use the GUI. Don't break the fold. Maybe it's multiple steps. Some of them you're just like, why is this so difficult or complicated? Why do I have to do 10 steps to the 3 lines of SQL? I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. But you're going to be performing. Yeah. Now recently, at least on the SQL connector, there is a optional parameter that is called enable folding. So if you want
I saw that the other day.
So if you want to write SQL and you want to do some additional transformations, then you're going to have to write SQL, do a little bit of customization with the M, and then you can use the GUI. But who is that person that's going to go, I love SQL, and I'm also going to go learn M? Not a lot of those exist.
Yeah. I think as well, from what I've seen, sometimes the users just get given the SQL by the IT department.
Yeah.
And then they just get into, I just need to, do this extra little column or this conditional column or something on it as well. And I don't want to bother the IT team or whatever, the real working world then just kicks in and you get a mash of both.
Yeah. I mean, you're sympathetic in that moment. So it's just like, and if you use the system-generated SQL from Power Query, your DBA will be yelling at you, being like, this is the ugliest SQL I've ever seen. Who wrote this? And you're just like, I just clicked.
But it's good, the with data flows and stuff as well now, that the sort of the folding indicators and stuff are improving, and that sort of thing is all moving in the right direction. So that's great to see. It'll help. That's
kind of the stepping back into the role, at least kind of coming into the Power BI side on the program manager on the Power BI Cat. It's now looking at those lenses where it's Power Query Online is so great. It's so great. When is this coming to desktop? I want it there today. But then you also want 10,000 other things fixed at the same time. So it's like, all right, well,
Yeah.
we'll bring that down to desktop at some point, but we really need to fix these other items first. So, like for me, the advanced editor, I think if you type, there's some autocomplete issues or like double completes. I didn't know about that for years until people on Twitter were pointing that out because I've just been using kind of VS Code and kind of other applications
Okay.
for so long. And I was like, I did not know it was this bad. So as I'm going to the developers, I'm like, hey guys, when are we going to fix this? Like, if we stop to fix that, then we can't get to these other great things. I would rather have the great thing today than kind of waiting for that advanced editor. So we'll see, but it's kind of those trade-offs, especially as us M people. It's like, we want cool things. Tablet Editor does cool things. DAX Studio does cool things. Where's our cool stuff?
Yeah. I can imagine it's a proper old balancing act and with competing needs all across, and it's just pick your battles and see what you can do when you can do it. So in a recent podcast, somebody pointed out their worst presentation moment.
Oh goodness!
So I was wondering if you'd had any horror stories of presentations gone bad, or have you been lucky?
Luckily, no. Blue screens of death, green screens of death. If you're on the insider builds, my worst was kind of at Power Platform World Tour. It's like surrounded by 30,000 Dynamics people who had never seen Power BI before, and getting Wi-Fi with that many people, couldn't do it. Couldn't connect.
Oh, right.
So all my stuff on OneDrive, everything else, I'm scrambling up into the last minute, and luckily I was finally able to get my phone and just a little bit of LTE service to try and download gigabytes or megabytes of stuff, whatever the size was. But that was the sweating it into the last minute moment for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's pretty freaky. Right, into the section on the 5 impossible questions.
Oh, good.
So 5 totally unfair questions that I don't expect anybody to know the answers to. And if you get one right, you're doing brilliantly, because I wouldn't have got any of these right. Question 1. How many characters long can a Power Query name be?
Can a Power Query name?
So like a named table in Power Query, you name your table, you name your query. At the top, this is the query name. How long can it be?
I'll take a guess.
So the loaded
255?
80.
That's it.
80 characters long, at least on my version.
Interesting.
So yeah, 80 characters for your Power, for the actual, not the applied steps, the actual name of the loaded table. 80 characters.
I wonder what that
There you go.
was. Why 80?
Okay, under Get Data,
Yep.
you get the drop-down list. You're in Power BI, you're in Get Data, you click the little drop-down and it pops down. And you go to this Azure connectors.
Yep.
How many Azure connectors are there? And I'll give you within 2. And it's the June release of Power BI Desktop I'm looking at. Oh, he's thinking.
Yeah, I mean, if I was to go through it in my head, I would say
There's a lot. There's a few.
there's got to be at least, I'll say 25. I don't know.
Oh, 16.
16.
16
I was thinking
Azure connectors.
I was thinking 20 at one point, but I was like, I feel like there's been a few more with like maybe some things being added or removed, but
Yeah, and again, you might have some sort of fancy insider.
I know. You're fine.
Okay.
At first, like Azure Time Series Insights and like all these other weird things that pop up every once in a while. I was like,
Yeah.
maybe I'll get to connect to that one day, but it's still spreadsheets and databases.
Yeah. I'm still, yeah. So, question 3. If you have a 1-column table in Power Query, so in the Power Query editor, you've got a 1-column table, you right-click that column, can you remove it?
A 1-column table?
So you've just basically got 1 column in the Power Query editor, you right-click, you go, is remove columns lit up? Can you actually right-click and remove that last column?
Clarifying question. When we say column, we're not meaning a list. We're meaning a table with a header and a body.
Correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So can I remove that? Let's say no.
You can. I don't know why you would, but you can.
Interesting.
Here we go. Just says empty table then as a
Does it
in the
do
field.
anything?
So-
Does it load?
oh, I don't know. I never actually tried loading it.
Because I know that you can create empty tables and it'll still load. Because people do a lot of that for kind of like the measure table. So you can do
But
it.
it's still a. Yeah. No, that's right. Actually,
But that's
yeah,
where
I didn't actually try loading it.
like if you delete the step and it's like, well, I'm gonna lazy loading, right? Where it's gonna look at it and be like, well, I'm not gonna do anything because you're not doing anything. But there's a
It
throw
doesn't
it.
actually run anything.
Yeah.
It's a bit weird. Okay, back into the Power Query editor window.
Yep.
Where can you find the button that has the word count distinct values on it?
Count distinct values in the Power Query editor.
Yeah, there's a button somewhere. Like I say, I didn't know the answer to any of these. I was scrabbling around and going, oh, I didn't know that was there.
So count distinct values, and this is for the table or for an individual column or
Well, I've just got a table of data. I'm sitting in my advanced editor. I've got a nice table of data, and I can go and click on a button that will give me a count of distinct values.
is it in the submenu? Help me out, Win. No submenu?
No.
It's just on the ribbon?
Well, it is. There is a drop down. It's under a so it is a sub menu. Sorry, there's a button with a sub menu underneath it.
So I'm kind of curious, a few different thoughts here. Is it in the top left, kind of cell selector from the Excel days? Or if we were to click on that, we get a lot of table properties. I'm thinking it could be within that. But also, if we were thinking about the ribbon, I would probably think home.
Yeah, it's in the ribbon.
Not home, but transformations. And then within, it's not within the table subgroup. It's within the, I don't know, what is it, like any data? And,
Under statistics, there's a
it under
statistics
numbers?
button.
is it under the number
Yeah.
subgroup?
The numbers subgroup.
Yep.
There's the statistics drop down, which will give you the sum, the min, the max. There's a count of distinct values under there.
Interesting.
I know. I never knew.
And it returns a result of just a kind of like an integer.
Yeah.
So it takes our table, counts it as an integer, and then that's it.
Yeah. I think you probably have to, maybe you have to select a column. You might have to select a column for it not to be grayed out. And then it'll just do a count of distinct.
Bad place to put it.
Weird, eh? There you go. So much to learn. So, all right, last question, which isn't actually about the product itself. It's about the Microsoft Learn Power BI page. Okay?
Yep.
So there's the Microsoft Learn for Power BI page. How many times on that page is Power Query mentioned, and how many times is DAX mentioned?
Are we talking about learning paths?
I would bring up the link. It's the,
aj.ms/PBI Learn. See if that's the.
I wish I'd put a link in now. Yes, I think that's the one. Yes.
I would say on that homepage, it's probably not referenced.
No, it's not. You're right. No mentions of Power Query.
I know
What
it's
about
on
DAX?
another path, but that is
okay.
very abstract. So, like, why don't I see this first step of getting data as the first thing that I see?
Well, it says get data a couple of times, but there's no actual mention of Power Query.
Is this a marketing thing? Should we go yell at someone? It's not called get data
I think
anymore.
so. Can we just yell at somebody? Oh, what DAX? How many times is DAX mentioned?
Well, I mean, if we're looking at like Phil's modules, I think he did like 4, perhaps. So there's got to be.
I guess it's a bit harsh because I'm not even sure we're talking about the same page because I haven't given you enough information.
No, I'm thinking about it. There's probably got to be, I'll say, two module references to DAX.
Yes. Oh,
See how good I am with that?
that is awesome. But then, the argument sometimes I hear about Power Query not showing up is that, oh well, there's no the button's called get data and blah blah blah, but there's no button for DAX. There's no reference at all to the word DAX anywhere.
Nope.
In Power BI. It's measures, it's this, it's that. So it's a bit of a skewed argument in my view. If you're going to mention DAX, you've got to mention Power Query.
So I would probably say Power Query has been late to the marketing game, right? Because if we think about the Power Query blog, that was only like maybe the past months. So they're just now starting to get their kind of legs underneath them. I think for the longest time, they just kind of sat in the background of being, whoa, we're the get data button. Well, we're the edit transformations button. Well, it's like, well, hold on, but you're an actual technology underneath all of this, and you're Power Query, and you're found in 12 different places, and people are learning you, and people are loving you. Like, let's tell people that you are Power Query. So
it is awesome. So spread the word. Start talking about it. It's like Tesla trying to sell cars and not telling anyone they were electric or had self-driving capabilities. It's just like, why is nobody buying our car? It just seems that these petrol cars are outdoing us.
You've got 4 wheels. Come on, everyone.
Yeah, we got 4 wheels. You should know. Yeah. Okay, crystal ball time. I know this is tricky given you're a Microsoft employee, but if you had, unlimited funds and all the power in the world, is there anything in particular you'd like to see in terms of future developments?
Standalone Power Query editor.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
Right. So
its own thing.
Why don't we have something that could be deployed to various tools? So I think Excel has it now with the Power Query templates. I think it's a PQT file or something. I'd have to look again. But you can now start extracting that, adding it into items. So why don't we have the standard format of Power Query that can be then loaded into Excel, Power BI Desktop, Azure Analysis Services, wherever Power Query is found? That to me would be incredible. If you've ever used Visual Studio SDK of the Power Query SDK over there, it's just, here's a code developer, here's an M engine, there's no GUI. Unfortunately, that's like, well, why don't we have a GUI on top of this code writer? That to me is like the perfect example. If we could write code, but we could also have a very pared down GUI, because spinning up Power BI for me, it's like, it's so intensive these days. Fighting with teams, everyone's just competing for resources. So I am with Ken, where he says, I do a lot more development in Excel, and then I just copy and paste the code over. I'm like, I completely buy into that now. If I'm just doing simple connectors, to Excel, maybe SQL Server, some of the items that are compatible from one product to the next, I'm sticking with Excel. So standalone. That's my vote, though.
Sounds good. I'd back that. And where can people best find you these days? Sort of links to any sites, or is it Twitter, or what's the best place?
Yeah, hunt me down on Twitter at the very least. Not about the cell, or you can just type in kind of Alex Powers. Hopefully you can find me through that method. At least over on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Alex M Powers. Alex Powers, once again, type me in over there. So those are the 2 places I hang out the most. I got rid of Facebook during the pandemic because I said, I don't want any more of this. So now I just tweet 8,000 times. Apparently, that's what Wit is telling me. And I will tell you as well, I absolutely love waking up in the morning and being tagged by people saying, why isn't this working, Alex? Yell at people at Redmond. So it's very cool to have those moments now when I wake up.
Awesome. Okay, wrapping things up then. As an aside, you often mention your wife's band. Is it Sissa? The band? Yeah. Okay. So what genre are they?
She's alternative, kind of rock, metal. I call it Black Sabbath meets Heart. So it's a little bit dark, a little bit kind of mysterious there. And then she's just got a beautiful singing voice, kind of having done choir kind of throughout her high school years. Awesome. And then I get to collect the band data. So I've got a Power App after every show. I write down their attendees. I write down how much they earned. And then that feeds into a Power BI report. So that way I can track. Which venue is paying them the most?
Next,
And, all the fun
next
things.
level. That's next level. What does she tell her friends that you do for a living?
Oh goodness. I think it's like she's just distilled it down to Microsoft, but I've pulled her into my nerdiness, and she knows exactly what I do.
Okay.
So I was like, "Oh, you're the weird Power BI guy." She's like, "You're just taking off and going viral on Twitter." She always laughs. She's like, "You got 3,000 followers now." I was like, "I guess. I don't know. I just like hanging out with people."
Yeah, totally. And before we wrap things up, I like to ask my guests if they've ever had a brush with fame, or if there's a little known fact about them. Obviously, being married to a rock star,
Yeah.
that's one thing. Yeah,
That's huge.
but anything else on the list?
I'll add never had chickenpox.
Okay,
So
that
I
might
know
not be a good thing.
people always worry like you're getting older, shingles and all these other things that can kind of take you down. Just like, all right, well, I'm working from home now. I shouldn't see anyone.
I'm never going outside again. Good
Good.
fact. And then a requirement for coming on Power Query Magic is you need to leave 2 of your own articles, posts, videos, whatever they might be. Your most popular one and your favorite one. So what are you leaving us?
30-day query. So at least people just go check out the playlist. Continue to use the hashtag because people are always still kind of jumping in if you ever need some help. And then the other one is PBI workshops. So that'll be aka.ms/PBI workshops. I just kind of use the in a day concept, but I say in an hour. If you gave me an hour's worth of your time and you're saying, Alex, I've got 10,000 other things going on, but I can give you this 1 hour. I need to make that worth your while. So I've got query folding in an hour out there. I've got DAX Studio in an hour, Tableau Editor in an hour. A lot of these are just if you want to go into the pro deep end of the pool, here you go. After an hour, hopefully this will get you started and push in the right direction. I think when you talk about, I want people to at least know what's possible, that's what this is meant for. Know what's possible, and if you want to dig deeper, you can. If you say, hey, this is not my job, I don't want to go into the depths of DAX to that level, completely understand.
Perfect. And we'll put for these things as well. So that's the popular and your favorite, or is
I would say that
cover
was probably my favorites at the moment, the PBI workshops, because I really want to try and tackle kind of this year's the day after dashboard in a day problem, as I call it.
which is a real problem.
It is. A lot of people, go to these events, they just start learning. There's no way that you can even tackle Power BI anymore in 8 hours. So I see a lot of people building themselves into corners. They're doing all these things wrong with the query folding, like we talked about breaking, writing their own custom SQL. How do I figure out how to solve that problem of the day after to get them back on the right path? So always excited for people who want to engage in those conversations with me. Find me, on Twitter or LinkedIn. If you're like, hey, I've been thinking about that too. We'll figure out like a content path and we'll just knock it out.
That's great. And finally then, I'm going to strand you on a desert island and you're allowed one item. It could be a luxury, it could be something practical, but in the honor of the M language, it must begin with M. So what object or thing are you going to take?
Well, I won't say an object or thing, but I'll say M for Melissa, which is my wife.
Oh, great answer.
And then obviously if you're saying, hey, that doesn't count, no people, matchbook, I'll just light the place up.
Okay, nice. Well, Alex, it's been awesome. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Win. Thanks for doing the champion here too, just on Power Query, this podcast. Like you said, there's just not enough light shown in this area, so it's awesome to get all these experts together. I don't include myself in that camp. I'm still learning things every day. But, we're the old school guys who had to learn IntelliSense by ourselves. It was just writing things by hand. But I
I think we're the one who've gone through the heartache of not having Power Query.
yeah.
And therefore we really, really appreciate having it. So that's where the magic of it is. You just go, that this would have taken me so long or been so clunky, and nowadays it's just so much more power now. It's amazing. So thank you once again, and keep sharing the magic, and I will see you later.
Thanks, when